Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Feature Crew. Today is an exciting day. We got the first full number model upgrade from Anthropic in, I think, over a year. And along with that is the first new Opus model in quite a while. And so they're touting world-class coding performance, really focusing on software engineering and coding benchmarks. And so we're excited to put it through our tests and see how capable it is. As with all new models, we're going to test it in their dedicated client. We've selected Claude Opus, which will be the focus of the video today, and turned on extended thinking. Our first test will be our storied planet generation test, which is my personal favorite to test a new model and get a really visual sense of how capable it is. And so we're going to use the same prompt we've been using with all other models, and we'll get it sent off. We are looking for, as always, a very comprehensive implementation that hits all of the requirements in this long prompt. That includes not just a procedurally generated planet terrain, but that terrain should have biomes and an atmosphere and clouds. And so we'll see how many of the features it hits. Models in the past have sometimes struggled with some of the harder ones like atmosphere and clouds. And over time, models have been getting better and better at hitting the features that we put in the prompt.
Whoa, hi.
Whoa.
All right. So
Okay, so immediately, if we ignore the crazy effect from whatever atmosphere shader they attempted, the terrain is looking quite good.
Yeah.
And you can see the water moving,
Wow.
and you can see that the water has its own see-through liquid shader, which is really cool. I would love to get it to fix these atmosphere problems. Not seeing clouds, but it does have biomes and terrain and water, as we were saying. Pretty impressive.
Do the controls work?
Let's see. We can turn up the rotation speed.
Hey.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that's pretty snazzy.
And we can see how it got the lighting really good.
And the sun's traveling across it. That's really cool.
As I drag it back and forth here. We'll give it some feedback, see if it can hit those lacking features, fix the atmosphere up. This graininess is starting to give me a headache. So Claude is now off thinking about refining the atmosphere, trying to get rid of that TV static effect, and it's already started implementation. Extended thinking is on, but it doesn't seem to really increase the amount of thinking.
Whoa.
Oh,
Look at this.
wait, it did exactly what I asked. I asked specifically for the sort of characteristic atmosphere glow, and it nailed that. And then the clouds are pretty awesome.
Oh my.
This is one of the best,
Yeah.
maybe the best cloud implementations we've ever seen.
If you can still move the sun around, it's officially the best.
Let's do it.
Yeah, look at that.
Wow.
Bravo, Claude.
Well, looking great.
Yeah, incredible.
Like truly incredible. So I think we're it's in the past, getting anything that looked like this from other models generally takes, two attempts would be the absolute minimum. Usually it was more. I think considering this was 2 shots with some pretty simple feedback, overall this might be the best response we've ever gotten for this test.
Easily. Yeah, easily the best result, I think. Especially looking at the clouds. The clouds always struggle, and they manage to elevate the clouds really well. It just seems to have a very good understanding of what our assumptions are hidden behind the prompt.
The clouds being elevated above the terrain makes a huge difference. Sometimes when the clouds are intersecting with the terrain, it makes it look weird. In the real world, if clouds were at the same level as a mountain, the clouds would look affected by the mountain in a very predictable way. And so if they're not, you get this sort of uncanny valley thing. We still kind of have this pinching at the top, at the poles, but that's something we could always ask for as a follow-up. Instead, what I really am excited to ask for is our normal challenge mode of adding sort of props like trees and rocks to the planet's surface, and then putting us down in first person. First, I'm going to ask for props and see how well it can do with props. So we've sent Claude off. It's now doing what I'm sure will be short thinking on how to add these props. And I've asked it for biome-specific props. I want hopefully different trees and different biomes, or maybe even cacti in the warmer areas, something like that would be awesome.
Wow. Okay. Let's see where these props are.
So it added the controls. Let's collapse that for a second. I'm not seeing the actual props.
Oh, hang on. There's definitely some. There they are. Those little dots.
Is that a tree or a...
That looks like a tree. That looks like a log. Tree without a top.
This looks to be
It's like
just a trunk,
Yeah.
right? That looks like a rock.
Oh, okay.
So the rocks are successful. It's the trunks that...
There's a good shot of it, yeah. Just a big old log.
And is that a little cactus cylinder? That's a cactus, I think.
Well, that's what I'm confused, because the rocks look green, so it looks like the top of the tree is removed from its trunk.
Interesting. Well, some of the rocks are gray, so that's an actual rock. And you might have noticed a treetop over there.
All right, well, let's drop us in first person and see if we can fix the trees while we do it. I got some bad news. Your usage limit has been reached.
So we hit an issue where we hit our Opus capacity after 4 requests. And so we're on a paid account, not the full multi-$100 paid account, but on the $20 a month paid, I believe it's called Pro. And so we were a little surprised to hit that limit so early. Have no fear, for future tests, we can switch over and use the Anthropic console. But because of that hiccup, we're going to call this test here and note that this is the most impressive performance we have seen on the planet generation test. Now, I have seen better performance on props, but usually they require prodding as well. So we're going to open source this result and you can play around, see if you can fix the props, see if you can get it to go down into first person. We'll leave that as sort of an exercise to the viewer, and we're going to move on to our business reasoning and analysis test.
Sweet.
Okay, we're set up here in the console for business reasoning. We are going to use the same prompt that we did with Gemini, where we ask the model first to do a bunch of searching for information on the latest AI models across all the different providers. This is going to require multiple searches, and luckily Anthropic does support the search tool with no limit on the number of searches in the console, so this is great. We'll be able to test it as if it was in client. And then after we do that request and sort of judge its ability to collect up-to-date information, we'll move on to an analysis phase where it goes and writes Python code, generates charts, and gives us a visual and textual analysis and set of recommendations for a business on what model they should use and how they should make changes in their business based on the developments in the AI space.
And they're off.
It's off. It started with thinking here, which is good to see. Again, another quick set of thinking, and it's moved straight on to web search. And as you can see, it's doing multiple web searches before it comes back and responds. It is really doing a comprehensive sort of deep research style report here. I have to say, this is one of the most comprehensive results I've seen. Again, I'm paying for each one of these tokens.
Yeah, you are. The Feature Crew is going to have to start an OnlyFans to pay for all of these licenses.
Okay, so it's back after, that was like at least a couple minutes of loading. It's a very comprehensive report as we watched it stream in, but we'll do a little bit of a walkthrough now. It started with Google and got the Gemini family. It also got some of the new models that were announced at Google I/O earlier this week. For OpenAI, it got their latest family of models. It even called out the sort of rumors around an upcoming GPT-5 launch. It did miss 4.5, which is interesting, but it got the important ones. It even went beyond models and started talking about Azure AI's platform updates at Build earlier this week, the integration of Grok, and the continuation of Microsoft's strategy of being the home for all models. And then, of course, it mentioned itself, which is good, a good thing to check. So overall, incredibly comprehensive and rivaling a dedicated deep research request from ChatGPT. So now what we'll do is ask it to do our analysis, create some charts, create Python code that analyzes all this data that it collected, and then at the end provide recommendations for a company that's trying to select models and set strategy based on developments in the AI space. My God! That request cost us like $5 at least, more probably.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely insane. So I'm going to buy some more credits. Subscribe to the Feature Crew, and we'll see you in a second.
Tell your friends, tell your family.
All right, we should be back in business. Credits are reloaded. Let's see if it can do it. It's still freaking going. And, dude, this was 100K input tokens. I'm like petrified. We've got the responses all set up in this doc here. Taking a look at what it generated, from a cursory glance, it's super impressive. So it started with an exploration of context window over time. You can see the ceiling of context window going up and some clustering around that 100K context window sweet spot. The cost performance trade-off analysis, we didn't dig into the code to see how it collapsed a bunch of benchmark results into a performance score, so that, we'll open source it. You can check that out. My favorite part about this chart is how it split up the standard models and reasoning models visually with different indicators, and you can very easily see how the reasoning models have these higher performance scores. What this probably doesn't factor in is that you're burning more tokens with the reasoning model. On the reasoning tokens, it doesn't seem to be adjusted by token per request. I like that it went beyond benchmarks and directly model-related analysis by starting to talk about the industry trends and the massive investment in AI infrastructure from the tech giants. And then, of course, it plotted this performance progression chart. It plotted more data points for itself and somehow only plotted, over the last 2 years or year and a half, only plotted 2 data points for OpenAI. So I think if it was more comprehensive with the data points it plotted, it wouldn't look so much like Anthropic is running away. But nonetheless, very good to see it it do useful charts that are actually actionable and let you understand the model capabilities.
This one, a little less so. It's trying to lump a bunch of different capabilities and map each one. But visually, it's just very hard to read, right? You're like, how do I read the highs and lows here? I think it does a much better job of this in its summary at the bottom. This one's just a bit of a mess.
And the scores aren't necessarily related, right? Like, so it's weird to show it as like a line chart.
Yeah.
This is more of like a histogram or like a radial chart or something would probably show better what they're trying to communicate there. The performance projection chart broke, unfortunately, so we do have to knock some points there as we wanted specific projections, and that failed. And then in the open versus closed source models, this is another very useful chart, and it communicates sort of a trend very well. So awesome to see that. And then it gets into this AI model recommendation by business scenario. So I'm not exactly sure how it did this score. This is, again, something you would want to dive into. Like, I can't tell what it's actually charting here because the domains and the models are both on the x-axis.
Right, yep.
I don't know what each cluster is for. Hard to tell. But then the most useful chart, and this is something we haven't really seen from other models, is beyond doing this went beyond the prompt. So we asked for a bunch of charts that sort of show its analysis and reasoning and then recommendations. It did both of those things, but what it did was it inserted this extra chart in the middle that was specifically designed to basically make recommendations and summarize over a bunch of the reasoning it did for the other charts. And so it breaks out the models into their own clusters here, and then it gives a score in a bunch of different areas for each model. So it allows for very easy comparison across different models. Again, you'll have to see if you agree with how this collapsed score was calculated, but in terms of following the prompt, exceeding the prompt, and providing something very useful, I was very impressed by this chart. Moving on to the insights, the things it noticed were things that everybody's talking about, right? Like explosive growth and capabilities, the cost revolution, the reasoners sort of taking the main stage. It did go into some more details as to why it's thinking that and some high-level numbers that will help justify those insights, which is great to see. And then this is what we're really interested in, is this action plan and specific recommendations for our fictional company. And so it made some interesting recommendations. It did a hybrid approach, as these models always tend to do. And in this case, it recommended 3.7 Sonnet over itself, and it seems to be indicating that that's based on the price. For customer-facing applications, it's basically calling that the top AI application model, at least generally, and then it's deploying DeepSeek R1 internally for coding and analysis, which is interesting, implying that that's a great cost savings. Now, I would recommend the opposite. Like, I would recommend that internally, especially for coding, if that's driving your business, like, you should be willing to spend more per token on that than you would on some broadly deployed customer-facing application that's going to burn a ton of tokens and get a ton of use. Then it went on to this optimal model selection by use case, and so this is a little bit more useful for me. I think it's providing a little bit of justification as to why it made its recommendations and broke down into customer service, content creation, software development, those sorts of things. It got a little funky in this ROI example. I'm not sure exactly how it decided.
19,840%.
Yeah, 40% developer increase, $2 million annual value creation based on no baseline of value creation. These conclusions, for me, were not as impressive as some of the conclusions we've gotten from other models and the recommendations from other models, but the charts and the analysis is definitely the most impressive result we've seen so far.
I align with that. I mean, I think its actual recommendations at the end are bad. Like, I won't say they're garbage. They're coherent given the data it has. I think the moment we're all waiting for is when we give one of these models a test and it says, oh, hey, I can't make a declaration based on the information I have, or it expounds on the limitations or what its reasoning is. Here it's just sort of, it's doing this raw comparison at cost versus quality. It doesn't necessarily explain that. So very good result. I think O3 was better at the actual conclusion, but charting, to your point, world class.
It would be interesting to see if we gave it a ton of fake details about the company for it to base its recommendations on. That might have improved the performance on the recommendations. So in future videos, we'll look into that. The last test we want to move on to is our classic maze test to test its agentic reasoning and world understanding in a general sense. So we'll get that set up.
And break Jacob's bank.
We got the maze test set up. If you've seen our videos in the past, you know that I believe it's O3.
Yep, O3 is up top. We got it to 17. One of our commenters, our subscribers, got it to 20. So that is the high water mark. I'm not necessarily expecting this model to beat that. They certainly haven't overly touted that, but it is a reasoner, so it should perform admirably.
We're hoping for the best. Our tool generates this sort of text-based representation of the maze, and It includes some instructions, and so we can run it. If it struggles with this, we can include an image as well, but we've also seen that confuse models in the past, so we're going to try it with just text to start. Already starting a longer thinking process. It is interesting to see like when it decides to think.
I mean, it's thinking correctly, but let's see.
All right. So it seemed to have provided a walkthrough of its reasoning and then also our final results, so we can check that with the tool. Close, but unfortunately, it failed a bit there. And this is on 10, so not the highest. Significantly smaller, especially when you consider the sort of exponential growth of potential paths as you increase dimensions as our leader. But we will give it an image as well and try the test again to see if it's able to perform better with both the textual and image representation of the same maze. So we'll regenerate a new maze and test it with that. We've got it set up with both an image and a text representation of the same maze, and it's off. Now, to be fair, it doesn't have the same agentic tool use capabilities as a system as O3 does, and that was really what gave O3 a leg up on solving this task. But until they have that, we'll test the model as is. It gave us a much longer path, it seems like this time. Maybe I'm going crazy. Boy, the image confused
image did
it.
not help.
Yeah, the image confused it quite a bit. Unfortunate that it wasn't able to hit a size 10 maze, and certainly nowhere near a size 20 maze. OpenAI is definitely still leading in this sort of agentic reasoning, especially with tool use, model as a system regard. So hoping to see more advances there from Anthropic in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how they announced this model and framed it really specifically as coding. I wonder if they're anticipating results like this, where you go, okay, hang on. Don't compare us to O3. Instead, compare us to Gemini 2.5 Pro. Put us in your code editor. That's where we think we're going to shine. Maybe this is a sign that models are going to increasingly diverge in what they're good at, but we'll see what OpenAI puts up next to compare.
So in terms of overall thoughts, both the coding and the business reasoning challenges I was very impressed by. Yeah. The Planet was the best result we've seen so far. I'm really excited to build larger things with it and see how well it can stay coherent through a larger project. We'll definitely have videos like that on the channel coming up. In terms of business reasoning, the best charts and the best sort of analysis I've seen, the problem was the recommendations and the conclusions weren't quite as strong as some other models. On this sort of agentic reasoning, world understanding tool use piece, nobody's even close to OpenAI there. So it's not the biggest surprise to see them focus more on coding and some of these benchmark maximization, and as Chris said, competing with Gemini. And so it'll also be interesting to see how these diverging capability sets of models, where O3 is not quite as good at coding in some regards as this model, how that will affect adoption and how that will affect how people perceive the models. So definitely let us know what you see in testing in the comments below.
It's a really interesting moment in AI. I'm curious to see as the year progresses, does that hold? Do we keep having companies sort of specialize down certain routes, or do we have people just win all of it? I don't know, but certainly this one, I'm very curious to try it in coding. Would love to hear from people in the chat if they want to see us try it in Cursor or Windsurf. Looks like it's not in Windsurf yet, it's maybe Cursor. And see how it would, if we let it loose on a code base, does it do even better? So let us know if you want to see that. Please like and subscribe. Model tests are getting expensive, so every subscriber helps. Share it with your friends and family. And thanks again, folks.
Thanks for watching, everybody.